Hey everybody, it's your old pal Tom here with the Tom Gulley Show and another cold open. That's right, a little later I'm going to tell you about the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. But we do the cold open because, we do a live streaming YouTube show. And I don't want to tell any tales out of school. But when you do a live streaming YouTube show, you just can't just jump into it. You got to wait for people to get into your chat room and get comfortable and make themselves at home a little bit. And because this is now an audio podcast as well, you don't want people to hear the on-hold music that you play while they do that and think, well, this is just a bunch of music. This isn't a podcast, because it is a podcast. I promise you, it will be a podcast. The good news for you is that we have a musical director. His name is Leon Kennedy, and he creates original, unique, somewhat proprietary music just for this show, just for you. And all you have to do is listen to 6 or 7 minutes of it, or just, fast forward through it. And then we get to the meat of the action, the show itself. And we tell you about things like, the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, or the life of Joe Ely, legendary musician who just passed away this week that you might not know of, or All in the Family. We'll tell you all the details you never knew about a groundbreaking TV series, whatever it happens to be. We just ask that you listen to a couple of tunes, toe tappers, that hopefully will make your day. And the great news for you today is we're debuting one of them. Yes, I just got it today. We'll play that one, then we'll play our Christmas song, and then the show will begin. And by the way, if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, pass it along. If you don't enjoy the show, well, we prefer you don't really say much about it at all. Just kind of keep it to yourself. Well, we'll be back in just a second.
Tom steps in shining, lifting spirits in the room. The wolf's already laughing with that friendly boom. Chef's in the kitchen, keeping everybody fed. Scott from Australia nods his bearded head. Rumpled trench coat enters with a mystery to unfold. Tom brings the warmth, turning every moment gold. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you'll never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. The wolf keeps up grooving with that easy midnight sway. Chef spins a ladle like when leading cabaret. Scott from Australia brings the thunder to the floor. Rumpled trench coat squints like he's seen this all before. Tom hits the rhythm and the whole room starts to move. Every single heartbeat falling deeper in the groove. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Oh, hey, I when the lights turn low. Tom keeps the moment bright, lifting every spirit as they dance into the night. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Snow is falling soft tonight, windows glowing warm and bright, but Christmas doesn't feel the same till I hear that golden name. Tom Gulley on the radio, spinning tunes that steal the show. It's a very gully Christmas, every heart begins to shine. Even spiders start to shimmer in their webs like silver lines. Yeah, very gully Christmas. Hear that rhythm, sweet and good. Bigfoot's listening from the treetops, grooving deep within the wood. Frost is dancing on the pane, candles flicker in the lane, spiders sway with all they feed, keeping to that perfect beat, and Bigfoot hums that mellow tune underneath the winter moon. It's a very gully Christmas, where the joy just rolls along. Spiders tapping in the rafters, Bigfoot singing to the song. Oh yeah, very gully Christmas, feels like magic in the air. Tom Gulley's voice is smooth as snow, and it's ringing everywhere. Come gather round the tree tonight, let the music hold you tight. Every creature, great and small, feels that gully Christmas call. It's a very gully Christmas, and the world is feeling right. Spiders spinning festive threads, Bigfoot dancing out of sight. Yeah, very gully Christmas, let the season sing on through. Tom Gulley brings the soul and cheer like only he can do.
Hey everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking? Good to see you tonight. Let me tell you about the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Big part of our culture. People reference it to this day. Gone without a trace. A lot of speculation as to where he might be. A lot of speculation as to who might have disappeared him. I, of course, because of, out of respect, due to the mafia ties, I dressed up a little bit. No disrespect. No disrespect. Look, I'm just trying not to get disappeared myself, okay? Before we get going too fast, too far, let me just ask you, if you could please, to like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell, all those absolutely free things you can do that only cost you a click to help our little show here. We do have super chats in our YouTube show. We do have memberships. You can purchase those if you'd like. You can gift memberships to other people because it is the Christmas season. Also, we have the PayPal. It's in the description of our YouTube program with all of our other contact information. Or even our audio podcast info is in there. Also, you can go to the TomGulleyShow.com. Our merch store is there. Great for the holiday season. There's savings there right now. I don't really know much about that. I try to stay as far away from that as possible. But it's nice stuff. Many of the members of the show have gotten it. And they tell me it's really nice. I only have like one item. And it's nice. It's very nice. At any rate, before we get going too far, we do have a little activity, very little actually right now, in our chat room. Crappy at Life is here, which is really a great screen name. He says, H2BH, happy to be here. I'm saluting him. Incidentally, in our opening songs, which I'm going to play both of them at the very end of the show, the new song, Once You Go Gully, some members of our chat room might have heard their names in that song more than once. So just a little tease to get you to stay to the end of the show, if you're into that kind of thing. Anyway, Jimmy Hoffa. If you haven't seen any of the many movies about Jimmy Hoffa, you haven't seen any of the many programs about his disappearance, I'll just go ahead and tell you a little about Jimmy Hoffa. James Riddle Hoffa, yeah, his middle name was Riddle, was born in 1913, but he disappeared on July 30th, 1975, and in fact was declared dead 12 years later. And he was a legendary American labor union leader who served as president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the Teamsters, from 1957 to 1971. He was alleged to have ties to organized crime and disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1975. Now, his rise to the top of the union is fraught with, let's say, not always on the up and up activity, okay? He started doing like grassroots level stuff as a teenager through his job with the grocery chain, which paid him very little wages and bad working conditions and very little, if any, job security, okay? So obviously, the workers were displeased with that situation. They tried to organize a union to better their wages, and although Jimmy Hoffa was very young, he had a courage and an ability with people that his fellow workers really liked, and he rose to a leadership position in the attempt for the union. By 1932, after refusing to work for an abusive shift foreman, Hoffa left that grocery chain partially because of his union activities. But because of this, he was invited to become an organizer, with Local 299 of the Teamsters in Detroit. Now, keep that local number in your head. It will become very important later. Local 299 of the Teamsters in Detroit. And in the early to mid-30s, he recruited a lot of new members to the union. His favorite tactic was to pull up on the road alongside a sleeping truck driver, wake him up, and then give him his sales pitch. Now, the Teamsters at the time were trying to grow. The Teamsters were founded in 1903, and they had 75 25,000 members by 1933. As a result of Hoffa's work with other union leaders, he consolidated local union trucker groups into regional sections and then into an entire national organization. And it took him about 2 decades to do all this. The membership grew in just 3 years to 170,000, so they added about 100,000 new members. And keep in mind, these members are, number one, paying union dues, so the Teamsters is taking in more money, and they have more leverage for better working conditions and higher pay. 3 years after that, just 3 years later, 1939, they had 420,000 members. So more than doubling the 170,000 in just 3 years. And those numbers grew steadily during World War II and the post-war boom to eventually top 1 million members by 1951. They started this whole thing throughout the Midwest where Hoffa was located. And Hoffa was very skillful at using what he called quickie strikes, secondary boycotts, and other means of leveraging union strength at one company and then move to organize workers in another, and then finally win contract demands wherever they went. Now, that process took several years, starting in the early 1930s, and eventually brought the Teamsters to a position of being one of the most powerful unions in the United States. However, trucking unions in that era were heavily influenced, in many cases controlled by elements of what we call organized crime. So Hoffa made accommodations and arrangements with many gangsters starting in Detroit, and organized crime's influence on the Teamsters grew as the Teamsters grew. I think I could go into great detail, and we could do a whole episode just on Jimmy Hoffa and every step of the way as he did all this, okay? He moved the headquarters of the Teamsters from Indianapolis to Washington, D.C. They had a big office building there. The staff was enlarged. They had lawyers for contract negotiations, as opposed to those early days where it was just pretty much strikes and strong-arm stuff. He took over presidency of the Teamsters in 1957, and one of the big things he did, and I could get into greater detail on all of the things he did, but probably the biggest accomplishment he ever had in his bid to expand the union is in 1964, he succeeded in bringing virtually all of the over-the-road truck drivers in North America under a single, what they called National Master Freight Agreement. Then he went and tried to bring the airline workers and other transportation employees into the union with sort of mixed results. The problem is, Jimmy Hoffa had some personal problems. And when I say personal problems, I don't mean that he wasn't getting along with his girlfriend. Nay, Jose. I mean, Jimmy Hoffa was in trouble with the law. Yeah. He faced major criminal investigations in 1957, and on March 15th, 1957, there was this committee called the McClellan Committee, and that was a Senate committee that was formed to investigate improper activities in labor and management. Well, on March 14th, 1957, he was arrested for allegedly trying to bribe an aide to this particular committee. Now, he denied the charges and was later acquitted, but the arrest triggered additional investigations and more arrests and indictments over the following weeks. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960, and his brother Robert Kennedy was named Attorney General. And Robert Kennedy was frustrated by the fact they couldn't convict Hoffa because he had been a counsel to the McClellan subcommittee. So as Attorney General from 1961, RFK pursued a very strong attack on organized crime and carried on with the so-called Get Hoffa squad of prosecutors and investigators. In May of 1963, Hoffa was indicted for jury tampering in Tennessee, charged with attempted bribery of a grand juror during his 1962 conspiracy trial in Nashville. He was convicted March 4th, 1964, and sentenced to 8 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. So he gets out on bail during his appeal, and during that time he's convicted in a second trial held in Chicago in 1964 on 1 count of conspiracy and 3 counts of mail and wire fraud for improper use of Teamsters pension fund, and sentenced to 5 years in prison. So he spends the next 3 years unsuccessfully appealing his 1964 convictions. These appeals reached the Supreme Court, but he started serving his 13 years, 8 for bribery, 5 for fraud, March 7th, 1967, at the Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. Now, you may be wondering, what's this got to do with Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance? Here he is with one of his lawyers at one point. It's got a lot to do with it. A lot to do with it. Because when Hoffa entered prison, he didn't want to give up control of the Teamsters. So he put sort of a figurehead named Frank Fitzsimmons in his place. Okay, he was also a longtime member of that Teamsters Local 299 and owed his basically high position in the union to Hoffa's influence. Even so, he distanced himself from Hoffa, and Hoffa's like, wait a minute, I was just going to tell you what to do, and you were going to do it, and Now, Hoffa still had a lot of control in the union, even from prison, but not as much as he used to. And while still in prison, Hoffa resigned as Teamsters president in June of 1971, and Fitzsimmons was elected for the same position just about 2 or 3 weeks later. So Hoffa's still looking at about 10 years in prison. Excuse me, during which time he's not going to be the head of the Teamsters. Well, on December 23rd, about 5 days off, 1971, less than 5 years into his 13-year sentence, Hoffa was released from prison. How could a guy doing 13 years federal get released? Well, U.S. President Richard M. Nixon commuted it to time served. And as a result of his previous resignation from the Union as the president, he was awarded $1.75 million lump sum as a termination benefit by the Teamsters Retirement and Family Protection Plan. Now, that type of pension settlement had never occurred with the Teamsters before. That kind of was the story of Jimmy Hoffa. It's like, hey, we're just going to do this. Nobody pay attention. Nobody gets hurt. The Teamsters then endorsed Richard Nixon, a Republican, in his presidential reelection bid in 1972. So you let Jimmy Hoffa out of jail, and then the Teamsters endorse you. How does that happen? They usually support Democratic nominees. So Hoffa's out on the streets again, right? And here's a charming picture of Jimmy Hoffa. What do you think about that? That's nice, isn't it? Isn't that lovely? Anyway, Hoffa's out on the streets again. But the commutation from President Nixon didn't allow him to, quote, engage in the direct or indirect management of any labor organization until 1980. Remember, it's 1971. Now, Hoffa said, I never agreed to that condition, and he accused a whole bunch of people of depriving him of his rights, and was suspected that that little codicil had been written in because the Teamsters requested it, but Frank Fitzsimmons said, I do nothing of the kind. I love not being president of the Teamsters anymore. But by 1973, Hoffa was planning to seize the presidency of the Teamsters once again. And he even sued to invalidate that restriction so he could reassert his power over the Teamsters. John Dean, who you might remember from the White House scandal, was a major government witness. He was called to depositions for Hoffa's, allegations that he never said that. And Dean said, no, I drafted that clause at the request of President Nixon. So Hoffa fails to win his case since the court said, no, the president had every right to impose that restriction. And there was quite a bit of misconduct while he was serving as a Teamsters official, so the court went, nah, we're not going along with that. So facing, at this point, he'd been in the press, he'd been in jail, and a number of other things. He's got another president in there that's distancing himself from him. There's a lot of resistance to Hoffa saying he wants to be the president again. He's lost a lot of his old influence. He accepts a non-management position with, you guessed it, Local 299 in Detroit, his old power base. And he hoped that within time he could work his way back up the ladder. He started working on an autobiography called Hoffa, The Real Story, which was published a few months after, one I'm about to tell you about. He lived with his family at their summer cottage in the village of Lake Orion, which is a sleepy little hamlet in metropolitan Detroit. About a half hour's drive from the Macca's Red Fox restaurant, which will play a significant role in our drama. His plans to regain leadership of the Union were met with opposition from several members of the mafia. The mafia. And I'll tell you, one of whom was Anthony Provenzano. And if that doesn't look like a mafia member, I don't know who does. Crappy at Life says Nixon rules. And he says he was, I'm not reading that portion of it. But yes, there's Anthony Provenzano, who had been a Teamsters leader in New Jersey and national vice president of the union during Hoffa's second term as its president. Now, Provenzano happened to be a capo regime in the New York City Genovese crime family. Capo regime means captain. You basically run your own crew. You're not the Don. You're not the person below the Don, but you're right below there. At least two of Provenzano's opponents in the Union had been unalived, and others who spoke out against him had been assaulted. Now, Provenzano, once an ally of Hoffa, became an enemy after they reportedly had a feud when they were both in federal prison at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania in the 60s. In 1973 and in 1974, Jimmy Hoffa asked Provenzano for his support to get his old job back. Provenzano refused and reportedly threatened by Hoffa, saying he would pull out his guts. which is relatively specific and graphic, and or kidnap his grandchildren. Other mafia figures who became involved in the conflict between Hoffa and Provenzano were Anthony Giacalone. When it's a mugshot, I'm sort of couching the issue there. I'm showing a mugshot right now of Anthony Giacalone, alleged kingpin in the Detroit Mafia, and also his younger brother Vito. Now, the FBI believes they were positioning themselves as mediators between Hoffa and Provenzano. The brothers had made 3 visits to Hoffa's home in Lake Orion and 1 to his law offices. Their avowed purpose in meeting Hoffa was to set up a peace meeting between Provenzano and Hoffa. Hoffa's son, James, said, "Dad was pushing so hard to get back in office, I was increasingly afraid that the mob would do something about it." His son was convinced that the peace meeting was a pretext to Giacalone's setting Dad up for a hit, since Hoffa had been increasingly uneasy each time the Giacalone brothers arrived. Hoffa disappeared on Wednesday, July 30th, 1975, after he had gone to a meeting with Provenzano and Giacalone. And he went to have that meeting at this restaurant in Bloomfield Township, suburb of Detroit. Now I believe it's in Southfield. Meeting was to take place at 2 p.m. at this, the Marcus Red Fox. It was the same place where the wedding reception of Hoffa's son James had been held. Hoffa wrote Giacalone's initials and the time and location of the meeting in his office calendar. TG, 2 p.m., Red Fox. Tony Giacalone, 2 p.m., Red Fox. Side note, I used to work in Southfield, Michigan, which is in or near Bloomfield Township. And at the time, the Marcus Red Fox was still open. The people at the ad agency I worked at, WB Donor, the people who brought you the Vlasic Stork, Takes a Licking and Keeps on Ticking from Timex watches, and Zoom 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 from Toyota, Mazda, whoever. Zoom Zoom Zoom, big national ad agency. Well, we would frequently go to lunch there, and there's a picture, I tried to find it, of a bunch of the Teamster types at a big table that they had at the Marcus Red Fox, which, by the way, served very good food at affordable prices. It was a big old-school restaurant, white tablecloths, and just like a nice working man's place. It wasn't fancy, but it was nice. It was a good place to eat. And so we would go there frequently. And at once, all of us, a whole ton of us went there, and we had our picture taken around that giant table. So yes, I have eaten at the Marcus Red Fox. It's a good place. I'm sorry, it is. It's a good place. Hoffa left his home at 1:15, and before heading to the restaurant, he stopped at the Pontiac, Michigan office of his close friend, Louis Linteau, former president of the Teamsters Local 614, who now ran a limousine service. Now, Linteau and Hoffa had been enemies early in their careers, but eventually became friends. When Hoffa left prison, Linteau also became Hoffa's unofficial appointment secretary, and had arranged a dinner meeting between Hoffa and the Giacalone brothers a few days earlier, in which they informed him of the July 30th meeting. Linteau was out to lunch when Hoffa stopped by, so Hoffa talked to some of the staff and left a message for Linteau before he left for this, the Marcus Red Fox. Between 2:15 and 2:30 p.m., very annoyed, Jimmy Hoffa called his wife from a payphone. on a post in front of Damon Hardware, directly behind Marcus Red Fox, and complained that Gia Colon had not shown up and that he had been stood up. His wife told him she had not heard from anyone. His wife, by the way, he married in 1936. He's a one-woman man, was Jimmy Hoffa. He told her he'd be at home at Lake Orion by 4 p.m. to grill steaks for dinner. Several witnesses saw Hoffa standing by his car and pacing in the restaurant's parking lot. 2 men saw Hoffa, recognized him, and stopped to chat with him briefly and to shake his hand. He was a very popular man. He was very gregarious. He was witty. He was funny. Hoffa made a call to Linteau in which he again complained that the men were late. Linteau gave the time of his call from Hoffa as 3:30 p.m., but the FBI suspected that it must have been earlier based on the timing of other phone calls from Linteau's office around that time. The FBI estimated that Hoffa left the location without a struggle around 2:45 and 2:50 p.m. One witness reported seeing Hoffa in the back of a maroon Lincoln or Mercury car with 3 other people. At 7 a.m. the next day, Hoffa's wife called her son and daughter to say that their father had not come home. So he was supposed to be home at 4 p.m. the previous afternoon, and he's not home. 7 a.m. the next morning. At 7:20 a.m., Linteau went to the Marcus Red Fox and found Hoffa's unlocked car in the parking lot, but there was no sign of Hoffa, nor any indication of what had happened to him. Linteau called the police, who later arrived at the scene. The Michigan State Police were also brought in, and the FBI was alerted. At 6 p.m., about 11 hours after Mrs. Hoffa called her children, Hoffa's son James filed a missing person report, and the Hoffa family offered a $200,000 reward for any information about his disappearance. The primary piece of physical evidence obtained in this investigation was a maroon 1975 Mercury Marquis Brougham, which belonged to Anthony Giacolon's son, Joseph. Now, this one's not maroon, but this is the year and the make of that car. And if that doesn't look like a mafia car, I don't know what does. This is a nice car, by the way. Big 2-door, plenty of room. The car had been borrowed earlier that day by Charles Chucky O'Brien to deliver fish. O'Brien was Hoffa's foster son, but the dealings and the relations between them had gone very sour in the years preceding Hoffa's disappearance. Investigators and Hoffa's family suspected that Chucky O'Brien had a role in the disappearance. And on August 21st, 3 weeks after Jimmy Hoffa went missing, police dogs identified Hoffa's scent in the car. Gia Colon and Provenzano, well, they denied having a scheduled meeting with Hoffa. They weren't, anywhere near the restaurant that afternoon. According to Time magazine, Provenzano was seen fraternizing with local union members in Hoboken, New Jersey, although he told investigators he was playing cards with some other gangsters in Union City, New Jersey, the day that Hoffa disappeared. Despite extensive surveillance and bugging, investigators found that the mafia members were generally unwilling to talk about Hoffa's disappearance, even in private. Almost a half a year later, 5 months, on December 4th, 1975, a federal investigator in Detroit testified in court before presiding Judge James Paul Churchill that a witness had identified 3 New Jersey men as having participated in the abduction and murder of James R. Hoffa. The 3 men were close associates of Provenzano: Thomas Andretta, Salvatore Brugiglio, and his brother Gabriel Brugiglio. And by the way, Thomas Andretta, he's one of the guys Provenzano said he was playing cards with the day Hoffa went missing. In October of 1975, Michigan Attorney General Frank J. Kelly went to Waterford Township to supervise an expedition to locate and exhume Hoffa's remains. The search was unsuccessful, but it was triggered by a tip from an unnamed informer who said a group of mafiosi wanted Hoffa's body found. After years of investigation involving numerous law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, officials have not reached a definitive conclusion as to Hoffa's fate or who was involved. Hoffa's wife, Josephine, died on September 12, 1980, a little over 5 years later. On December 9th, 1982, Hoffa was declared legally dead as of July 30th, 1982, by Oakland County, Michigan probate judge Norman R. Barnard. In 1989, Kenneth Walton, the agent in charge of the FBI's Detroit office, told the Detroit News, "I'm comfortable I know who did it, but it's never going to be prosecuted because we would have to divulge informants and confidential sources." In 2001, the FBI matched DNA from Hoffa's hair, taken from a brush, with a strand of hair found in Joseph Giacalone's car. But it is possible that Hoffa had traveled in the car on a different day. On June 16th, 2006, nearly 30 years later, the Detroit Free Press published the entire Hoffa memo, a 56-page report prepared by the FBI for a January 1976 briefing on the case at the FBI headquarters in Washington. Although not claiming conclusively to establish the specifics of his disappearance, the memo records a belief that Hoffa was murdered at the behest of organized crime figures who regarded his efforts to regain power in the Teamsters as a threat to control the union's pension fund, which they wanted to control, and frankly, they did control. By the way, like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell, anything you can do to help out our little show would be Jake. Absolutely wonderful. Our chat room has gone dormant the last 2 days. Crappy at Life, thank you. And Judy Tester says, Tom, looking snazzy tonight. Must have a hot date later. Well, Judy, I'm just dressed up because in case anybody from, the organization is watching, I want to give due respect. With all due respect, no disrespect. The Hoffa memo contains a conclusion based on evidence that Chucky O'Brien, who the FBI described as a habitual liar, was driving Joseph Giacalone's maroon 1975 Mercury with license TMS 416 on the day of the disappearance, and that Hoffa was seated in the right rear seat of the car. His body scent was located by police dogs, and a piece of his hair was recovered from the back seat. A pump-action 12-gauge shotgun was seized from the trunk of the car, and numerous 22 and 38 caliber bullets found in the glove compartment. As of 2021, digs were still periodically conducted in the Detroit area to search for Hoffa's body, but a common theory among experts is that the body was cremated. However, crime historians and investigators have just never tired of trying to figure out who done this. Crappy at Life says, I think the chat might be broken. I don't think so. I think no one's listening to this show today. That's what I think. It's the holidays. People got things going. Hey, maybe Jimmy Hoffa just isn't that popular. Half my messages don't send. Oh, wow. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Who knows? There's a widespread agreement among crime historians and investigators that Jimmy Hoffa was murdered on the order of his enemies in the mafia. I mean, that just stands to reason. But the key details remain either unknowable or unprovable, and that means no individuals have ever been charged. You know? Some people believe that Hoffa had tried to further his reascension into the Teamsters Union by cooperating in investigations against his enemies, clearing the way for him to take his seat back. And that could be a possible motivation for them to get rid of Jimmy Hoffa. One of the chief investigators in the case, however, says he doubts Hoffa could have seriously threatened the mafia in this way, saying that any incriminating information Hoffa could reveal would either incriminate himself as well or be beyond the statute of limitations. That same investigator thinks the killing was accidental, and the men who were sent to meet Hoffa were only meant to be insultingly low-level messengers. And he argues that Hoffa had no realistic prospects for a comeback, and therefore, why would they do anything to him? But criminologists don't really go along with that. In his 1991 book, Hoffa, Arthur A. Sloan said the most common theory of FBI investigators was that Russell Bufalino was the mob boss who ordered the hit, and that Salvatore Briguglio, and his brother Gabriel Briguglio, Thomas Andretta, and Charles Chucky O'Brien were the men who lured Hoffa away from the restaurant. And the theory is that O'Brien was used as an unwitting dupe to lure Hoffa away because Hoffa was suspicious of the other men, and without someone familiar being there, wouldn't have gone with them. The version of that theory is that Chucky O'Brien picked Hoffa up from the Marcus Red Fox parking lot, and Hoffa was dispatched either in the car or driven to an unspecified location. Keith Corbett, a former U.S. prosecuting attorney, has since suggested that the mafia would have considered O'Brien too unreliable to be entrusted with a role like that. The location of any murder is also unknown, but any violence in the restaurant parking lot would have easily attracted witnesses. Therefore, the Hoffa's memo suspects Hoffa was lured away to a different location. Sloan, in his book Hoffa, listed a local waste incinerator and a landfill in New Jersey as possible locations where the body was taken. The latter suggestion is also supported by another leading investigator. There are tons of other speculations. Some think that Frank Sheeran, who is the subject of the Martin Scorsese movie The Irishman, confessed. And he confessed in a book, I Heard You Paint Houses, Frank the Irishman Sheeran, in the closing the case on Jimmy Hoffa, The author is Charles Brandt, and according to the book, Sheeran claims O'Brien drove him, Hoffa, and Sal Bergoglio to a house in Detroit. The house belonged to an elderly widow who was lured out of her house, making it an implausible location for law enforcement to suspect. Sheeran claims he shot Hoffa and ended him at that house. Sheeran then claimed Hoffa's body was taken to a crematorium in another state and cremated. Other evidence refutes these claims. Truthfulness of the book, including parts about Sheeran's confessions to killing Hoffa, has been disputed by two separate articles, one written by law school professor at Harvard, Jack Goldsmith. One of the more famous theories is that Jimmy Hoffa's body was buried in Giant Stadium. In a 2004 episode of the Discovery Channel show Mythbusters, The Hunt for Hoffa, the locations in the stadium in which Hoffa was rumored to be buried were scanned with ground-penetrating radar. They were trying to reveal any disturbances that would indicate that there was a human body buried there, but no trace of anything was ever found. Also, Giant Stadium was demolished and rebuilt in 2010, and they didn't find anything then either. The legendary serial killer, the Iceman, Richard Kuklinski, in one of his jailhouse confessions, released after his death, he claimed that he was part of a four-man team who kidnapped and ended Hoffa. Former FBI agent Robert Garrity, who worked on the case, dismissed this as a hoax, and most people think that's unlikely. In 2012, in Roseville, Michigan, police took samples from the ground under a suburban Detroit driveway after a person reported witnessing the burial of a body there around the time of Hoffa's disappearance. But tests by Michigan State University anthropologists found no evidence of human remains. In January 2013, there's a million of these. The reputed gangster Tony Ghizzarelli implied that Hoffa was originally buried in a shallow grave with plans to move his remains to a second location. Ghizzarelli said the plans were abandoned and Hoffa's remains lay in a field in northern Oakland County, not far from the Machus Red Fox. He, of course, denied any responsibility or association with the disappearance. In June of 2013, the FBI, acting on this information, were led to a property in Oakland Township, which was owned by Detroit mob boss Jack Tocco. After 3 days, the FBI called off the dig. Nothing was found. The case remains open. Thomas Andretta, who died in 2019, and his brother Stephen, who reportedly died of cancer in 2000, were named by the FBI as suspects. Both were New Jersey Teamsters and reputed Genovese crime family mob associates. In April of 2019, the former Colombo crime family capo Michael Francese, I can't stand this guy. You'll see him all over YouTube. He is as evil, bad, just the icky as they come. Can't be trusted at all. But man, he plays that mobster thing like crazy. Anyway, he stated he was certain that Hoffa's disappearance had been mob-related. He said he was aware of the location of the body and the identity of his shooter, and had tapes that revealed details of the disappearance. And when they pressed him, he said, "I can tell you it's wet, that's for sure. And upon good information, again, I think I know who the real shooter was, still alive today, in prison." Said it's wet and it's deep in 2018. He also claims that he has a recorded tape that spells out everything, and he might release this at a later date. This Michael Francese, I mean, I don't know him personally, and he might be a good guy, and I know Joey C. likes him and all that, but you can't be involved in all that stuff and now be like, hey, I'm just telling the truth here. Nothing you say can be believed. If you got the info and you got then why wouldn't you release it? Don't believe it. And it's the truth with a lot of these guys. It's like, you're the worst criminals ever. You're the guys that say we never hurt no women or kids and we kept it within the business. No, dude. No. In a deathbed statement, a landfill worker claimed to have buried Hoffa's body in a steel drum 15 feet below the surface of a landfill beneath the Pulaski Skyway in New Jersey, Jersey City to be specific. In October of 2021, the FBI obtained a warrant and completed a site survey of the landfill. July of 22, they announced, didn't really find anything. So Hoffa's legacy remains controversial. Some saw him as a latter-day Al Capone or someone, and he did hugely successful in improving working conditions for his constituents. In 1995, a memorial service for Hoffa was conducted by his family. In 2023, a historical marker was erected in his home state of Indiana by the Indiana Historical Bureau, Clay County Historical Society, and the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Oh boy, and he has been portrayed by Robert Blake in the miniseries, Blood Feud. Tom Bosley, Richie Cunningham's dad, Mr. C in the Jesse Owens story, Trey Wilson in Robert Kennedy and His Times, Jack Nicholson in the movie Hoffa, and Al Pacino in The Irishman. In the film Fist, Sylvester Stallone plays Johnny Kovac, a character based on Hoffa. In the Sergio Leone film Once Upon a Time in America, Treat Williams' character, syndicatist James Conway O'Donnell, was inspired by Hoffa. In the parody film Naked Gun 33 1/3, The Final Insult, a file folder labeled Location of Jimmy Hoffa's Body is prominently displayed in a cabinet during one scene. Don't Tug on Superman's Cape, 6th episode of the 3rd season of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, features a wealthy couple collecting unique objects. Among them is a concrete block with a hand sticking out. They claim it to be Jimmy Hoffa. The comedy Bruce Almighty uses powers endowed by God to manifest Hoffa's body in order to procure a story interesting enough to reclaim his career in the news industry. So Jimmy Hoffa, don't know where, don't know why, don't know who, but that's all I got to tell you about Jimmy Hoffa. Now let's see if there's any remarks in the chat room that are new at all. There are not. Saturday, we will be covering the life and legacy of legendary musician Joe Ely, Springsteen, The Clash, Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan. The list is endless of people he worked with and for, and passed away just a few days ago. So we will have a little tribute to him. On Sunday, TV show that revolutionized television. Controversial then, controversial now. Lots of details and finer points that you don't know. All in the Family. Yes, Archie Bunker. A television show that was the #1 watched TV program of the year for not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 consecutive years. Other than its first year, it never dropped out of the top 10, ever. Awesome TV series, All in the Family. That will be Sunday, and then Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on this program. A holiday tradition. The Reverend Bob Levy will be here for It's a Wonderful Levy. He and I will discuss the movie It's a Wonderful Life, as we do every year. So you'll want to definitely be here for that. And that's about all I got, other than to play for you, unless anybody's got any questions, moans, groans, gripes, complaints. I'm not just going to play one. I'm going to play 2 songs to end the show. Same 2 I played at the start. The Wolf isn't here, so he won't get to hear himself in the song. Chef is not here, so he won't get to hear himself in the song. Third one, Rumpled Trenchcoat. Wait, who's the third one? Oh, Scott from Australia is not here, so he won't get to hear himself in the song. And Rumpled Trenchcoat, sadly, is not here. But I think he listens at other times. But they're all in the song. Crappy in Life, you should have been in the song because you're here. But I don't have anything to do with that. Somebody more talented than me writes the songs. Hey, so thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing and liking and all those other things, if indeed you did. It was a pleasure to tell you about Jimmy Hoffa. Hope you enjoyed it. And that old clock on the wall says, like the Reverend Al Green, it's time for me to get on up out of here. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And with all that being said, I think the only thing left to say is, till next time, we'll see you next time.
Tom steps in shining, lifting spirits in the room. The wolf's already laughing with that friendly boom. Chef's in the kitchen, keeping everybody fed. Scott from Australia nods his bearded head. Rumpled trench coat enters with a mystery to unfold. Tom brings the warmth, turning every moment gold. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you'll never recover fully. Tom puts on a show, let the good times roll. The wolf keeps up grooving with that easy midnight sway. Chef spins a ladle like when leading cabaret. Scott from Australia brings the thunder to the floor. Rumpled trench coat squints like he's seen this all before. Tom hits the rhythm and the whole room starts to move. Every single heartbeat falling deeper in the groove. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Oh, hey, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. When the lights turn low, Tom keeps the moment bright, lifting every spirit as they dance into the night. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on a show, let the good restless